About a month or two ago, I set out in search of some vintage model kits. My travels took me to several antique shops, but not the tiny hole-in-the-wall places where you find magical 80s movie plot devices. I'm talking about the giant barns out in the middle of nowhere on the side of the road. Besides being a somewhat decent place to find old kits, these antique malls also have a lot of old tank-related toys and items hiding in their shelves. So today I'd like to share with you some of the stuff I found. Hey, before we get started, I'd just like to ask you to subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot. Thank you. Now back to the video. The first thing that caught my eye upon entering the first mall was this strangely colored metal wind-up toy. It has the shape of a World War I British rhomboid tank, but the suspension printed on the side definitely looks like the suspension on many World War II American tanks, either HVSS or VVSS. Curious as to what exactly this was supposed to be, and when it was made, I did some looking around and eventually found several eBay listings for it. What I had come across was called the Sparkling Tank, although the one I had found wasn't sparkling too much. According to the seller, it dates back to the 1950s. Most of, if not all, of the ones that I found were over $300 US online. A couple of shelves down was this weird thing. I couldn't find this thing anywhere online, which makes me wonder how rare it is. If you have any ideas as to what this thing is called, or where it was made, or when it was made, let me know in the comments. To me, it looks like some sort of strange, warped version of an M41 Bulldog or a Pershing. The jumble of wires coming out of the back and connecting to that big green box is how the tank is driving around, meaning that it is a pretty early example of an RC tank. This one is fairly normal. It's a model of some version of a British Centurion tank. The only strange thing about it is the massive muzzle brake at the end of the gun. Why does it look like that? Here's a collection of smaller military vehicles. On the top row, there's a 6x6 truck, some sort of fan-driven watercraft, probably driven by Phil Swift and an M1 Abrams. Below those, there is a very chunky, completely unidentifiable tank, an M16 half-track, and what appears to be a Merkava. In the same booth, there was this classic green Army Guy tank. It's molded to look like an M48 Patton, and for a cheap toy, it's actually a pretty decent representation of it. I especially like the giant USA stickers on the sides of the turret. You know, just like the real thing. I actually have one of these toys. Recently I got it at a garage sale for 25 cents. It feels pretty solid. The plastic is nice and thick on it. It rolls too, thanks to these big wheels hiding underneath the treads. This next one is of course the infamous Russian T-35, a massive 5-turreted design. Wait, that's the wrong picture. Yeah, okay, this is the right one. This is yet another weird metal tank toy that just so happens to share the name. Although this design probably would have done better in the Battle of Brody. This one was found on eBay for only $10, in about the same condition that I found mine. Hidden among the surprising abundance of artillery pieces and field gun toys was another metal tank. This one was another RC variant, unlike the last. However, its eBay price was much higher. Also, apparently these were made in Japan. Uh-oh, there's that big muzzle brake again. This time on a Tiger 1. I actually found out that both this and the Centurion tank from earlier were made by a company called Corgi, which had a variety of different die-cast metal tank toys. Here's a pretty good looking model of a Stridsvagn 103. I'm not exactly sure if this is an RC toy or just a really big static model of the Swedish doorstop, but either way, it looks pretty accurate. This one is for sure an RC toy. Strangely enough, it is also for sure based on a German Leopard 2A5, instead of just being a generic tank like most of the ones we've seen so far. Yep, this is a glass candy-holding tank. I'm honestly really sad I didn't get this. It's a really unique item. Not too sure about that stacked turret setup though. Clearly this is supposed to just be another generic tank and not an actual vehicle. Although for fun, I tried designing what this thing might have looked like had it been real, and now I'm honestly concerned. Here's another simple green tank toy based off an M46 Patton. This one appears to be suffering from unsanded mold seams. It's also pretty dirty. In the background you can see some sort of armored car. On the same shelf was this big fella here. As the tag says, this is indeed a tank. These two here look like pretty old model kits. The one in the back is another British Centurion tank, while the one in the front is a Russian JS-3, complete with unaligned Soviet star and a commander that looks like he's made out of Play-Doh. Although they aren't 100% accurate to their real-life counterparts, they aren't too bad, and from the era they were made, they're fine. This is an M113 armored personnel carrier, a very widely used APC in the latter half of the 20th century. While primarily used by the United States, it and its variants were used by several countries during the majority of the Cold War. Ah yes, the most expensive item on our list. This is a solid cast iron tank sculpture, vaguely reminiscent of an M13 or 14 model Italian tank from World War II. It's quite large too, and although I didn't try picking it up, I can tell it is, like the tag says, very heavy. Speaking of Italian tanks, if you'd like to see me building and painting a 1/35th scale kit of an M1441, check the I card in the top right corner. Finally, something we haven't seen before. According to the tag, this is a real German tank crewman's hat, something like what these fellas are wearing here. How it got to the US, I can only imagine. Ah, the return of the metal wind-up toys. This one is for sure modeled after a World War I tank, complete with a doughboy popping out of the back. For all its inaccuracies, this one is a classic. Although why it has a turret, I'm not really sure. Here's another old completed model kit. This one is either a SU-100 or SU-85. It's hard to tell given both the poor quality of the kit and the fact that the gun goes out of frame. And like the JS-3 and Centurion models from earlier, it's completely unpainted. Not sure why that was a trend. Hey, we all know what this fearsome machine is. This is the all-powerful good car. Man, I wonder what kind of good car that is. With that tracked suspension and casemate, it looks like a Porsche. But with that type of gun, it looks like a Rolls-Royce. The world may never know what kind of good car this is, but to me it looks like a tank. While we're on the subject of cars, how about a Matchbox car? Specifically a metallic green armored one modeled after a ferret armored car. The tag calls us a weasel instead of a ferret, which is partially true. The actual Matchbox name for this toy is indeed Weasel, even though that's historically incorrect. But who cares, in both cases it's a military vehicle named after a long rat. Also, it's a toy. This is a pre-built model of a British Challenger MBT. For the most part, it's pretty well made and painted, however, the one I found was down with a case of barrel sag. Nobody wants barrel sag. There seemed to be a lot of pre-built models at Mall 3. I think there were around 6 of these prototype mouse display pieces. They were only $10, so naturally I had to get at least one. They're really well done and capture the V1 mouse pretty well. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to remove it from the base, even though it's only held in by 2 screws. This tank looks like it must have been well played with. It's missing half of its gun. But as far as comparing it to a real vehicle, forget it. This looks more like something out of a G.I. Joe cartoon than actual history. And yes, there are more mice? More mice in the background. In a world where wars are waged. In a world where heroes are forged. In a world where good car reigns supreme. In a world. Only one machine can fight back. This is Half Truck. Half Truck? Why is it called that? What's the other half? Right. With its impressive rectangular mobility, its firing anti-aircraft gun with ack-ack noise, and its 2 D-cell batteries. It is half truck. Why is it called that? Who named this thing? You cannot possibly be ready for half truck. So after witnessing the glory of half truck, I found a couple of actual model kits still in box. This first one is an M50 Ontos, a very strange armored vehicle from the Vietnam War. Scaling for this kit is a little weird, but according to the internet, it's at 1/32nd scale. Also, for some mildly annoying reason, the previous owner detached all the pieces from the sprue. I will be building and painting this kit sometime in the future, so stay tuned. The other kit I found was this T-3485 from the 1980s. Looks like this one is in much better condition than the Ontos. Most of the pieces are still attached and in bags. It will also be receiving its own series of videos at some point. That's gonna do it for today's video, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this showcase of the not-so-common creations of the past. I encourage you to support me by subscribing to the channel, and maybe leaving a comment for what you'd like to see in the future. I am the Tank Nerd, and thank you for watching.